This is Tar Heel Illustrated publisher Andrew Jones coming to you from Chapel Hill, right in front of the Blue Zone at Kenan Stadium. Jacob Turner and I, just a few minutes ago, left the open portion of the 5th practice of fall camp for North Carolina. 2 open practices so far on the schedule. Day 1, we came to you with a video after that, and today, right now, there are no other open periods of practice that are scheduled. There could be a time somewhere in the next week or 2 that let us in again. So as of right now, this is our last opportunity to see the Tar Heels do much of anything until they take on South Carolina August 31st in the season opener in Charlotte. Right now I want to bring on Jacob Turner, THI staffer, who was with me at practice. We got to see 10 periods. They go 5 minutes a period. They didn't do a ton of stuff because there was a threat of lightning, so Mac Brown pulled everybody inside the indoor facility, and they worked on a few of the things. But honestly, Jacob, I spent most of my time watching the quarterbacks. That's what everyone wants to talk about. Quite frankly, it's the biggest unknown, because even though linebacker, there's not a tremendous amount of proven depth there. At least we kind of know who's going to play, and we know how it'll shake itself out. Quarterback, you can only put one on the field at a time, and there are 3 guys that are interesting cases here, and that's what most people are talking about. So that's what we're going to talk about first, and then we'll get into some other things. You got a chance to shoot a lot of video and watch the quarterbacks a lot first. I think you and I have a similar view on where it stands right now, and I know that this is very fluid. Before we give you our rotation, understand that this is just day 5. It's the first day of full pads. They haven't been in full pads yet. A lot of stuff changes once guys start to hit. And as Mac Brown said the other day to us after the first practice, every time these guys throw a ball, it's a chance to go up a notch, or it's a chance to drop a notch, or just keep it going. So there hasn't been a decision made. Today didn't make it, didn't lead them in any direction toward who's 1, who's 2, or who's 3. It's going to be a few more weeks before the coaching staff really has an idea of how this is going to shape out. But you know what? We got to get people fired up. We have to give an opinion, so we're going to give our opinion right now. Jacob, 1, 2, and 3 right now. What was it for you?
I think 1, 2, and 3 for me, AJ, and I think you'd probably agree with it too, was Jace Ruder, Sam Howell, and Cade Forden. We did see that rotation to start out. Jace Ruder came in first, ran with the first team a few times. Then it was Sam Howell, and then it was Cade Forden. We got to take that with a grain of salt, though. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what we're going to see when the season starts, and that doesn't necessarily mean that's the order of the guys right now. But based on what we saw today, and I think we've talked about it a lot in the offseason, obviously, and we've kind of speculated on what we think is going to happen based on what we've seen in practice, based on what we've heard from guys, which, granted, we haven't heard a lot from the guys and coaches. Players have been pretty tight-lipped on the quarterback situation, understandably. But for me, like I said, AJ, to answer your question, it's Ruder, Howell, and Fortin right now. And when you think about that, interesting to think about is Cade Fortin's the most experienced guy of those 3 in terms of playing last year. Now, granted, him and Ruder did not see a lot of action. They both went out with injuries, and obviously that hurt their development a little bit last year. And if they didn't go out with those injuries, who knows what this program would look like right now and how many games that the team would have won last year. But that's a whole other situation in itself. But for me, I like what I'm seeing from all the guys. I think Ruder's got some good attributes. I think Sam Howell brings a little bit something different to the table. And I think
the ball explodes out of Sam James.
It does. It does.
The ball just fires right out.
It does.
It does pretty much with Jace. Jace could throw a long ball. Sam could throw a lot of stuff. What I've seen with Fortin, he doesn't throw as tight a ball.
No.
He wobbles a little bit. He had a ball picked in front of us toward the end. I think it was in the 9th period when we were watching. And it's because the ball just didn't have enough zip to get to the receiver. And when you start looking at the drills they do and the rotation in the drills, Matt told us back in the spring, the order that they went didn't mean anything. But now that they're in August and they're the ones who are competing, every second that they're doing anything, whether it's in film room or on the practice field, they're constantly competing. He wants them to be in full competition mode. So if we're going to take something from the order that they go in and the rotation and all the different drills, Ruder usually went first. Hal usually went second, and when Hal didn't go first, when Ruder didn't go first, Hal did, and Fortin almost always went third.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that maybe it means nothing. Maybe that's what they're showing the media, so we can talk about stuff that really ends up not meaning a darn thing. Exactly. But I do think it does. Our eyes don't deceive us.
No.
And all 3 are good. I mean, I think even if Fortin's your 3rd guy, that's not a bad problem to have. But there's still more time. Let's see how these guys handle well, they're not going to get hit, but everything happening in front of them is going to be full contact, full speed, and they're going to have to do it day in and day out. The guy who's most consistent moving them, not the guy who throws the most beautiful long ball, not the guy who throws the super tight 10-yard pass over the middle. It's the guy who consistently does enough stuff well, and we don't get a chance to see that because they're not going to show us 11 on 11. They're not going to show us 2-minute drill. They're not going to show us how they communicate with the kids in certain situations. So there are far more intangibles that we're never going to see in the periods that we're allotted to actually watch practice that the staff sees that they use to make their ultimate decision.
Yeah, and it's a good way to put it. And I will say something about Reuter that's always stood out to me is I think Reuter he looks the most built. He's probably the tallest out of those 3 guys. He's the strongest out of those 3 guys. I was talking to you about it when we were actually out there watching him. And he reminds me a lot of Mitch Trubisky. I'm not talking about his game. I'm really talking about the stature he has, his body strength. One thing that stood out about Mitch is when he came in, he wasn't a huge kid, but after a couple years in the weight room, he bulked up. Reuter kind of came in as a big kid. Reuter last year was one of the biggest kids in that group, if not the biggest kid. Now, granted, Fortin's close to him in height, but Reuter just has that stature and something. And when you see him standing beside Sam Howell, I mean, Sam Howell's a smaller kid. I know the staff have talked about him kind of being a Brett Favre-like mold. I've compared him to Baker Mayfield. A lot of that has to do with his stature and his height. But I mean, the shortest out of those 3 guys is Sam Howell. Yeah. And then Fortin and Reuter are taller guys, bigger guys, but they all have very similar attributes. And like you put it, I mean, they're all good quarterbacks. I don't think you could go wrong with either of them. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out over the next few weeks going into the season.
The guys protecting them in the front, I think we have an idea what the starting offensive line is going to be, barring injuries. When they play South Carolina, it's going to be Charlie Heck at left tackle. You're going to have Ed Montilus at left guard, Brian Anderson at center, Nick Polino right guard, and Jordan Tucker at right tackle. Polino was getting some work in at center today, which is good because he's going to get some work in at center. And Ty Murray, the true freshman, doing some backup work at center as well. You got to have 3 or 4 guys that are capable of snapping the ball in a game ready when you go into a game, because as any fan base should know, injuries happen. Yeah. Exactly. And they can happen here just like they have the last couple of years, so they got to have guys ready. We'll talk more in the report that we file later tonight about the second and third lines on the offensive line. Defensively, again, I think that there are very few questions right now about who's going to start where, and I know that it's just a 5th day. Guys are moving around. We reported yesterday that 2 days ago, Trey Morrison starting at corner. Yeah. Well, that's kind of what they've been doing in practice, but it's such a fluid thing in the secondary right now. Guys are getting a look all over the place that it wouldn't be a surprise if they take the field against South Carolina and Morrison's the starting nickel and somebody else is the other starting corner. So I kind of like the way they're doing things. Bateman wants every defensive back to sample each of the spots back there so they understand the defense better, so they play off of each other better. And there are going to be opportunities where situations they might have to move a guy over for a half because of an injury, because of a fight, a guy gets suspended because of a targeting penalty or something like that. Whatever the case may be, they have to be prepared for all those scenarios, and that's what this time of year is for. So when we show you videos and when you read our write-ups, we're reporting what we see that day, but so don't take too much into, hey, Polino was playing center today. Yeah. Well, Polino's going to play center a couple of days a week to get the work anyway. Mm-hmm. It just so happens that one of those days was when we were there observing.
Yeah, there's a lot of fluid change. One of the things, especially in the secondary, I mean, we've heard about it from a lot of the secondary guys we've talked to, Miles Dorn, to name one. They talk about how fluid and everybody's kind of getting in a different position. Miles Wolfolk talked about how he's getting reps at different positions and whatnot. Trey Morrison's getting reps at nickel. He's getting reps at cornerback. Obviously more reps at cornerback right now, which we've talked about and you mentioned a few minutes ago. But that's just something about Jay Bateman's defense. There's a lot of fluidity in it. There's a lot of changes that go along with it. And I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing. Obviously, at this point in fall camp, you're preparing for the worst case scenarios too. You're preparing for injuries, you're preparing for suspensions, you're preparing for targeting calls, whatever it may be. So guys have to get different reps at different positions. So like you said, there is some positions where you can kind of see, especially on the defense, who your starting group's going to be, particularly at the cornerback spot, just because of the lack of depth there right now. But the fluidity is something that is going to be a big theme of this team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So like you said, you have to take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt. But I mean, from what we've seen today, I think the fluidity is a good thing. And I think giving guys different looks with the new staff is only going to help you going into the season.
And the guys in front of the secondary, Gimmel, and Ross right now linebacker. Of course, the down linemen, Strobridge and Crawford. I mean, they're really way ahead of the rest of the guys in that group. And Tamon Fox is kind of way ahead there at the hybrid spot, but you've got some other players there that are athletes that have been interesting to see so far. I enjoy watching Lawler, but I really enjoy watching Chris Collins. I love the upside there. It's just a matter of getting out here, getting dirty, being physical, and just kind of learning to play the hybrid thing. These guys have played one way or the other their whole lives. Now they're having to learn to adapt to do this, which is very, very different. It's only day 5. There's 16 more days of practice before they get into game week. Hopefully we'll be invited in for another opportunity to observe. If we do, we will bring you guys a report here from in front of the Blue Zone behind Loudermilk Center. Blue Zone, that's what it is, and it's really hot, and the sun is blazing down right now, and AJ needs to get some water, and we got to go back and do interviews.
Yep.
We're going back to do interviews after practice here in a few minutes. This video will be up. We've got a full report later coming for practice. Tomorrow we got a great feature that Jacob wrote on Trey Morrison. We've got other features coming up, and you know what? We're not just Carolina football. We got recruiting stuff. Clint Jackson has a basketball recruiting piece coming up too, so we got a lot of things going on here on Tar Heel Illustrated. And Jacob, thanks a lot, my friend. I'll meet you over at the practice facility for post-practice interviews with Coach. We got Mac Brown today, and we have, I don't know, 8 or 9 players, hopefully 8 or 9 players. Can't wait to get over there and see what they have to say. All that stuff will be on Tar Heel Illustrated tonight. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you in a bit.